The moment before Alara Vance died, she felt nothing but relief. Not fear, not panic, just the cold certainty that falling might finally end the years of starvation, the midnight beatings, the slow erasure of everything she'd once been. Her stepmother's hand shoved hard between her shoulder blades, and the cliff edge crumbled beneath her feet. Wind screamed past her ears. The rocks below waited with indifferent patience. But Duke Adrian Blackthorne saw what happened, and unlike everyone else in her life, he refused to look away. Want to know if she survives? Stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning Alara turned 23, she woke up on the kitchen floor. Not because she'd fallen, not because she'd fainted from hunger, though that had happened twice before. She woke there because the small storage room off the scullery, the space she'd been sleeping in for the past 4 years, had flooded during the night. The ancient pipes had finally given up, and when she'd tried to salvage her few possessions, her stepmother Cordelia had locked the door from the outside. "You'll sleep where servants sleep," Cordelia had said through the wood, her voice honey-sweet, "since you insist on behaving like one." So Alara had curled up on the cold stone floor near the dying kitchen fire, her father's old coat wrapped around her shoulders. It still smelled like him sometimes, if she pressed her face into the collar. Tobacco and old books and the lavender oil he'd used for his headaches. That smell was the only thing left of Thomas Vance, aside from the crumbling estate that bore his name. She pushed herself up slowly, joints protesting. The gray light filtering through the high windows told her it was just past dawn. If she hurried, she could get the breakfast started before Cordelia came down. If she was lucky, her stepsister Vivian would sleep late, still recovering from last night's dinner party. Alara's stomach cramped at the thought of food. She'd eaten nothing yesterday except the burnt ends of bread the cook had tossed aside. Cordelia kept the pantry locked now, kept everything locked. Said it was to prevent theft, but everyone knew the only thief in Vance Manor was hunger itself. The kitchen door swung open. Mrs. Hewitt, the elderly cook, stopped short when she saw Alara. Her weathered face creased with something that might have been pity, quickly hidden. "Up already, miss? Please don't call me that." Alara's voice came out rough. She cleared her throat. "Just Alara. You know she hates it when anyone uses my title." "You're still the master's daughter." "Mrs. Hewitt." Alara met her eyes. "Please." The old woman's jaw worked like she was chewing something bitter. Finally, she nodded. "There's porridge from yesterday. I can warm it." "I'll do it. You should rest your hip." "My hip is fine." "Your hip is never fine. You soak it with liniment every night. I can smell it." Mrs. Hewitt made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. She lowered herself into the chair by the hearth, the movement careful. "Your father would be ashamed, seeing you like this." "My father is dead." Alara stirred the cold porridge, trying to make it look like something edible. "And if he'd lived, none of this would have happened." "You sound bitter." "I am bitter. I'm also cold, hungry, and sleeping on floors." She paused. "But at least I'm honest about it." The older woman watched her with those sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. "The Duke's coming today?" Alara's hand stilled on the spoon. "What?" "Duke Blackthorne. He sent word last week, said he'd be calling on the household to discuss the Northern Road contracts." Cordelia never mentioned. "Of course she didn't. Why would she tell you?" Mrs. Hewitt shifted in her chair. "But the whole staff knows. She's been in a state about it for days. Had poor Vivian fitted for 3 new dresses." Alara's mind raced. The Duke of Blackthorne rarely left his estate in the north. He was known for being ruthless in business, cold in demeanor, and entirely uninterested in the petty social machinations of provincial society. If he was coming here, it meant something significant. It also meant Cordelia would want Alara invisible. "She'll lock me in the cellar," Alara said quietly. "Probably. Or send me to the village on some errand that takes all day." "More likely." Mrs. Hewitt leaned forward. "But child, listen. This might be your chance." "My chance for what? To embarrass myself in front of a duke? To prove I'm exactly what Cordelia says I am? A burden? A failure? A girl who couldn't manage her own inheritance? To be seen." The cook's voice turned fierce. "Someone outside this house, someone with power. He could see what's happening here." Alara wanted to laugh, but it would have come out broken. "Mrs. Hewitt, men with power don't see girls like me. They see what they're told to see. And Cordelia is very good at telling stories. Before the old woman could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway above. Sharp heels on marble. Cordelia was awake. Alara moved fast, abandoning the porridge, grabbing the ash bucket and brush. If Cordelia found her idol, there would be consequences. There were always consequences. She was halfway up the servants' stairs when the voice called down. "Alara!" She stopped, took a breath, turned. Cordelia Vance stood at the top of the stairs in a morning gown of deep emerald silk, her blonde hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. She was beautiful the way a knife was beautiful, all clean lines and careful edges. When Alara's father had married her 8 years ago, everyone had called it a fairy tale. The wealthy widower and the graceful widow, each with a daughter forming a new family. No one wrote fairy tales about what happened after the wedding. "Yes, ma'am?" Cordelia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "The Duke of Blackthorn will be visiting this afternoon. You'll make yourself scarce." "I could help with preparations?" "You'll make yourself scarce," Cordelia repeated, each word precisely placed. "I've arranged for you to deliver some correspondence to the village. It's quite urgent. You'll leave within the hour." "The village is 6 miles. Then you'd better start walking." The smile sharpened. "Unless you'd prefer to stay. I'm sure the Duke would be fascinated to meet my dear stepdaughter. We could tell him all about how you manage the household accounts." "Oh wait, you don't, do you? Because the last time I trusted you with money, you spent it all on—" She paused delicately. "What was it again, dear?" Alara's throat tightened. She knew this game. Cordelia would reference the missing funds, the ones that had disappeared 3 years ago while Alara still had access to the estate accounts. Everyone believed Cordelia's version, that Alara had stolen from her own family, squandered money on frivolous things, proven herself unworthy of her inheritance. No one knew the truth, that Cordelia had forged the documents herself, that she'd needed Alara discredited before she could begin the legal process of transferring full control of the Vance estate to Vivian. "I'll leave for the village," Alara said quietly. "Good girl." Cordelia descended 2 steps, bringing them almost level. Up close, Alara could see the fine lines around her stepmother's eyes, the careful powder that concealed them. "And Alara? Don't hurry back. In fact, why don't you visit the old church? Spend some time in reflection, prayer perhaps, ask for guidance in becoming a better daughter." The mockery was subtle, layered under false concern. Cordelia had been perfecting this tone for years. Alara said nothing. She'd learned that silence was the only defense that couldn't be weaponized against her. "Oh, and take the old road. The main road is being prepared for His Grace's arrival. We can't have you underfoot, making things untidy." The old road added 2 miles to the journey. Alara would be walking for hours, likely missing both breakfast and lunch. By the time she returned, the Duke would be gone, and Cordelia's performance would be complete. "Yes, ma'am." Cordelia brushed past her, trailing expensive perfume. At the bottom of the stairs, she paused. "You know, there are orphanages that would take a girl like you, homes for the indigent. I've been generous, allowing you to stay. Some might say too generous." "Some might," Alara agreed, her voice empty. "Remember that." Then she was gone, her silk skirts whispering against the marble like secrets. Alara stood on the stairs, ash bucket in hand, and felt the familiar numbness settle over her. It was easier than rage, safer than hope. She'd survived 4 years of this by becoming small, quiet, forgettable, by accepting that the girl she'd been, Thomas Vance's beloved daughter, heir to a respectable estate, a young woman with prospects and plans, that girl was dead. This Alara was just trying to make it through another day. She delivered the ash bucket to the scullery, washed her hands and face in the cold water, and changed into her only decent dress. It had been good fabric once, before years of wear had faded it to a tired gray blue. The hem was carefully mended where she'd caught it on a fence. The sleeves were let down as far as they could go, but her wrists still showed, pale and thin. Mrs. Hewitt pressed a small bundle into her hands as she left. "Bread and cheese. Don't argue." "She'll notice it's missing." "I'll say the cat got it. Now go." The morning air bit cold as Alara stepped outside. October had turned the gardens brown, and the first frost had come last week. She pulled her father's coat tighter and started walking. Vance Manor sat on a hill overlooking the coast, connected to the village below by two roads. The main road was broad and well-maintained, curving elegantly through the countryside. The old road, the one Cordelia had assigned her, was narrow, rutted, and ran along the cliff edge for nearly a mile before cutting inland. Alara had always hated that stretch. The drop was sheer, the path crumbling in places, and the wind came off the ocean like it had personal grievances. But she walked it anyway, because she'd been told to, and because resistance had been beaten out of her so thoroughly, she sometimes forgot what it felt like. The village was busier than expected. Farmers had brought the last of the harvest to market, and the dock workers were securing boats against the weather that everyone said was coming. Alara delivered the correspondence, meaningless letters to businesses that barely knew the Vance name anymore, and tried not to notice the way people looked through her. She'd been invisible for so long, sometimes she wondered if she'd actually disappeared. The church was cold and empty. She sat in the back pew, not praying exactly, but thinking about her father, who'd loved her fiercely and died too soon, about the year after his death, when Cordelia had still pretended kindness, about the slow transformation as kindness became criticism, criticism became punishment, and punishment became a way of life, about the moment she'd realized no one was coming to save her. She must have sat longer than she thought, because when she emerged, the sun was already past its peak. If she hurried, she might make it back before dark. If she was lucky, Cordelia would be so pleased with the Duke's visit that Alara's late return would go unpunished. She wasn't lucky. She never had been. The old road was worse in the fading light. Alara picked her way carefully, watching for loose stones. The wind had picked up, shoving at her back, making the dead grass hiss. Below, the ocean threw itself against the rocks with patient violence. She was halfway along the cliff path when she heard the carriage. Alara glanced back. A small enclosed carriage was moving up the road behind her, moving too fast for the rough terrain. The driver was hunched against the wind, focused on controlling the horses. She pressed herself against the hillside to let them pass, but as the carriage drew level, it slowed. The door opened. "Miss Vance?" Cordelia leaned out, her face a mask of concern. "What fortune? We've been searching everywhere for you." Alara's stomach dropped. We have a guest, dear. He's been asking about you specifically. Isn't that wonderful?" No, nothing about this was wonderful. Cordelia's smile was too bright, too sharp. This was a trap, but Alara couldn't see the shape of it yet. "The Duke wishes to meet you," Cordelia continued. "Do get in. We mustn't keep him waiting." Every instinct screamed at Alara to run. But where would she go? She had no money, no allies, nowhere to hide that Cordelia couldn't find her. She climbed into the carriage. Vivian sat across from her mother, dressed in pale pink silk, her golden curls elaborately arranged. She looked like a porcelain doll, pretty and perfect and entirely under Cordelia's control. "Hello, Alara," Vivian said softly. Vivian. They'd been friends once, sort of. Two girls thrust together by their parents' marriage, trying to make the best of it. But Cordelia had poisoned that too, turning Vivian into an extension of herself, teaching her that love was conditional and cruelty was strength. The carriage lurched forward. Alara grabbed the strap to steady herself. "The Duke has been most interested in the estate," Cordelia said conversationally. "He's considering investing in the northern roads, you know. It could mean significant prosperity for the region." "That's wonderful," Alara managed. "Yes, of course he wanted to meet all members of the household. I explained your circumstances, your preference for solitude, your difficulty with social situations." Cordelia's tone remained light, sympathetic. He was very understanding. Alara's hands clenched in her lap. Cordelia was building a narrative, carefully laying groundwork. Whatever was about to happen, she'd already crafted the story that would explain it. "Where are we going?" Alara asked. "The manor is the other direction. We're taking the scenic route. The Duke wished to see the coastline." Lies. All lies. But Alara couldn't prove it, couldn't fight it, couldn't do anything but sit in the swaying carriage and wait for whatever came next. The carriage stopped. They were on the highest point of the cliff path, where the road narrowed to barely more than a cart track. On one side, the hill rose steep and rocky. On the other, nothing but air and 100-foot drop to the churning ocean. "Out," Cordelia said pleasantly. Alara didn't move. "Why?" "Because I told you to." The pleasantness cracked, showing the steel beneath. Now. Vivian wouldn't meet her eyes. Alara climbed out slowly. The wind nearly knocked her down, shoving at her with massive hands. The driver stared straight ahead, his face carefully blank. Cordelia descended gracefully, her skirt snapping in the wind. She moved close to Alara, so close their faces were inches apart. "Do you know what the Duke asked me?" she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the wind. "He asked why Thomas Vance's daughter was living like a servant. He asked if you were being cared for properly. He asked to speak with you directly." Alara's breath caught. Someone had noticed. Someone had questioned. "He was going to investigate," Cordelia continued. "Can you imagine? All my work, all my careful planning, threatened by one man's inconvenient curiosity." Her smile was terrible. "I can't allow that." Understanding came too late. "No." Cordelia's hand shot out, shoving hard into Alara's chest. Alara stumbled backward. Her heel caught the edge. For one suspended moment, she teetered there, arms windmilling, Cordelia's satisfied face the last thing she saw. Then she fell. Wind screamed past her ears. The sky wheeled overhead. Time stretched into something elastic and strange. She thought of her father. She thought of all the ways she'd tried to survive. She thought that maybe dying was just another kind of escape. The rocks rose up to meet her, and then hands caught her wrist. The jolt nearly ripped her arm from its socket. Alara slammed against the cliff face, breath knocked from her lungs. Someone was gripping her wrist with crushing strength, holding her suspended over nothing. "I've got you," a man's voice, strained with effort. "Don't let go." She looked up. A stranger hung halfway over the cliff edge, one arm braced against the rock, the other locked around her wrist. He was dark-haired, sharp-featured, his gray eyes intense with focus. Blood dripped from where the rocks had cut his hand. Behind him, another man was pulling him back, shouting something Alara couldn't hear over the wind and her own thundering heartbeat. They hauled her up. Strong hands dragged her over the edge and onto solid ground. Alara collapsed onto the dirt, gasping, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "What in God's name?" The stranger who'd caught her rounded on Cordelia, his voice cutting through the wind like a blade. "Did you push her?" "Your Grace!" Cordelia's voice was pure shock, pure horror. "How terrible! She must have stumbled. The wind, you see, and she's always been so unsteady." "I watched you push her." Each word was precise, cold. "I saw it." Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Cordelia's face transformed, cycling through denial, calculation, and finally settling on wounded dignity. "Your Grace is mistaken. My stepdaughter is unwell. She's been distraught lately, talking about ending her suffering. I brought her here to talk, to reason with her. When she tried to jump, I attempted to stop her, but—" "Lies." The word cracked like a whip. "I would never—" "Be silent." The Duke turned to his companion. "Marcus, you saw it as well?" The other man, younger, sandy-haired, dressed in traveling clothes, nodded grimly. "I did, Your Grace." The woman shoved her, deliberately. Cordelia's mask slipped. For just a moment, pure rage flashed across her face. Then it smoothed again, becoming confused concern. "This is absurd. Your Grace, you must understand. Alara has been troubled for months. Ask anyone in the village. Ask our servants. She's unstable, prone to dramatics. Is that why you told me she preferred solitude?" The Duke's voice was quiet now, which somehow made it more dangerous. "Why you said she was difficult? You were building an explanation, in case anyone asked questions." He crouched beside Alara, who was still struggling to breathe. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Can you stand?" She tried. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The Duke, because this had to be Duke Blackthorn, no one else carried that kind of authority, slipped an arm under her shoulders and helped her up. Alara had never been this close to a man before. Certainly not one like this. He was tall, lean, with the kind of face that didn't soften into kindness but could cut you with its focus. His clothes were expensive but practical, well worn. Working clothes for someone who actually worked. "Your Grace." Cordelia's voice had taken on a pleading quality. "Please, you must see how this looks, but I swear to you, on my life—" "Your word is worthless," he cut her off. "Marcus, help Miss Vance to the carriage." "Your carriage is on the main road," Cordelia said quickly. "You'll need—" I don't need anything from you. The Duke's gray eyes fixed on Cordelia with absolute contempt. Except silence and distance. Vivian spoke for the first time, her voice small. Mother, we should... Be quiet, Vivian. The girl flinched. Marcus, the Duke's companion, helped Alara toward where their horses were tethered just off the road. Her whole body was shaking now, reaction setting in. She'd almost died. Cordelia had tried to kill her. The Duke had saved her. None of it made sense. Wait! Alara pulled free, turning back. My father's coat. It was lying on the ground where she'd fallen. Cordelia stood over it, her face unreadable. The Duke retrieved it himself, shaking off the dust before draping it over Alara's shoulders. This? She nodded, unable to explain why it mattered, why this worn old coat was worth more than her own life. Your Grace, Cordelia tried again, desperation creeping into her voice now. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. If you would just allow me to explain... You're done explaining. The Duke's voice could have frozen oceans. You're done lying, manipulating, and playing games with people's lives. When I return to the manor, we'll be having a very different conversation than the one I planned. He turned to Alara. Can you ride? I think so. Marcus will take you to the manor. I'll deal with this. But, Miss Vance... His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something other than cold authority. Something almost gentle. You're safe now. I promise you that. Promises were dangerous things. Alara had learned not to trust them. But standing there on the cliff path, her stepmother's hatred finally exposed, the ocean raging below, and this stranger offering protection, what choice did she have? She let Marcus help her onto his horse. As they started down the road, she looked back once. The Duke stood between her and Cordelia like a wall. Behind him, Vivian was crying silently in the carriage. Cordelia's mask had finally shattered completely, showing the fury beneath. And Alara realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Cordelia. Not of what came next. Not even of hoping. For the first time in 4 years, someone had seen the truth. Someone had acted. Someone had refused to look away. The horse's steady rhythm carried her toward whatever came next, and Alara wrapped her father's coat tighter around her shoulders and let herself believe, just for a moment, that she might actually survive this. That she might even deserve to. The thought was radical, dangerous, fragile as new ice. But it was hers, and for now, that was enough. The ride back to Vance Manor felt longer than the distance justified. Marcus didn't speak, which Alara was grateful for. She couldn't have formed words if she'd tried. Her mind kept replaying the moment. Cordelia's hands against her chest, the weightless terror of falling, the certainty that it was finally over. Except it wasn't over. Someone had caught her. The manor appeared through the trees, its gray stone walls stark against the darkening sky. Alara had grown up here, played in these gardens, run through these halls. Once upon a time, it had felt like home. Now it looked like a prison she'd miraculously escaped. Servants stood clustered near the entrance, their faces uncertain. Word had already spread. Something had happened with the Duke. Miss Alara had been involved. No one knew what to do. Mrs. Hewitt pushed through the group, her weathered face creasing with relief when she saw Alara. Child, you're hurt. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Alara looked down. Her palms were scraped raw where she'd hit the cliff face. Blood had soaked through her sleeves at the elbows. She hadn't even noticed. Come inside, Mrs. Hewitt said firmly. We'll get you cleaned up. His Grace said to wait, Marcus interjected quietly. He wants to speak with Miss Vance when he returns. Then he can speak to her after she's been tended to. The old cook's voice held steel. The girl nearly died. She needs care, not interrogation. Marcus's expression softened slightly. I'll tell him you insisted. Mrs. Hewitt led Alara through the servants' entrance, avoiding the main hall where curious eyes would follow. In the kitchen, she sat Alara down and began cleaning the wounds with practiced efficiency. What happened? She asked quietly. Cordelia pushed me off the cliff. The old woman's hand stilled. Sweet, merciful. The Duke saw it. He and his man both witnessed it. Mrs. Hewitt sat back slowly. Then she's done. Finally done. Is she? Alara's voice came out hollow. You didn't see her face when he accused her. She was already building a new story, making me out to be unstable, suicidal. She's been doing this for years. Why would anyone believe me now? Because a duke witnessed it, child. A man with power and influence. Men with power believe what's convenient. Alara pulled her arm back, rolling down the sleeve to cover the bandages. And it's more convenient to believe a troubled girl tried to harm herself than to believe a respectable widow attempted murder. Before Mrs. Hewitt could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy boots, moving with purpose. The Duke entered the kitchen without knocking, Marcus a step behind him. His coat was dusty, his hair windblown, and there was a hardness in his expression that made the room feel smaller. "Leave us," he said. Mrs. Hewitt bristled. "The girl needs—" "I'm not going to hurt her." His voice softened fractionally. "Please." The old woman looked at Alara, who nodded. After a moment's hesitation, Mrs. Hewitt left, Marcus following behind her. The door closed with a quiet click. Silence settled over the kitchen. The Duke pulled out a chair and sat across from Alara, his movements deliberate. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, though his eyes held the weariness of someone who'd lived harder years than that. "How long?" he asked. "How long what? How long has she been doing this to you?" Alara's throat tightened. "Doing what, Your Grace?" "Don't." The word was gentle but firm. "I saw the way you flinched when she spoke, the way you expected to be hit. I saw how thin you are, how worn your clothes. I saw—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Just tell me how long." 4 years, Alara heard herself say. "Since about 6 months after she married my father." "And your father?" "Dead, riding accident. Though now I wonder—" The Duke's expression darkened. "You think she killed him?" "I don't know, maybe. Or maybe she just got lucky." Alara laughed, but it sounded wrong. "Either way, once he was gone, there was no one left to protect me." "What about other family, friends? Surely someone noticed—" "Noticed what? That I stopped attending social functions? Cordelia told everyone I was shy, difficult, preferred solitude. That I'd had a breakdown after father died and needed quiet to recover." The words spilled out faster now, years of silence breaking. "She was so careful, so patient. First she isolated me. Then she discredited me, made it look like I'd stolen from the estate accounts. By the time anyone might have questioned it, I was already the problem daughter. The burden. The girl who couldn't be trusted." The Duke was very still, listening with an intensity that made Alara feel exposed, seen in a way she hadn't been in years. "The servants knew," she continued. "Mrs. Hewitt, some of the others. But what could they do? She controls everything, their wages, their positions. Speaking up meant losing their livelihoods. Someone should have spoken up anyway." "That's easy to say when you're not starving." He flinched like she'd struck him. "You're right. I apologize." Alara blinked. In her experience, men like him didn't apologize, didn't admit fault. "Why did you come here today?" "Business. The Northern Road contracts." He leaned back in his chair. "Your stepmother has been petitioning for months to have the main route redirected through Vance land. It would have meant significant income for the estate." "Let me guess. She was very convincing. She was professional, prepared, knew exactly what arguments to make." His mouth twisted. "But something felt wrong. The numbers were too perfect, the projections too optimistic, so I decided to visit personally, ask questions, meet the household. And she couldn't risk you discovering the truth." "No, though I suspect if I hadn't witnessed the attempt on your life, she would have found ways to keep us from meeting. Send you away on errands, claim you were ill, construct barriers." He paused. "What would you have done if I'd left without seeing you?" Alara considered the question honestly. "Survived, like I always do, until I couldn't anymore." "That's not survival, that's slow death." "Sometimes they're the same thing, Your Grace." Something shifted in his expression, not pity exactly, but a kind of grim recognition, like he understood more than he was saying. "Adrian," he said abruptly. "I'm sorry? My name is Adrian. You don't have to call me Your Grace every sentence." "That wouldn't be proper, but—" "Proper." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The woman who tried to murder you today has been welcomed into society, treated with respect, given power over your life. All because it was proper. Forgive me if I don't care much for propriety right now. Alara didn't know what to say to that. She folded her hands in her lap, feeling the ache of her scraped palms. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now I make sure you're protected, and I make sure she faces consequences for what she's done. You can't prove it. Not really. It's your word against hers, and she'll have a dozen explanations ready. She always does. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Then we'll find proof. Documents, witnesses, evidence of the abuse. There is no evidence. She was too careful. There's always evidence. He stood, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Financial records showing how she's been draining the estate. Testimony from servants about how you've been treated. The fact that you're living like this. He gestured at her worn dress, her thin frame, while she and her daughter wear silk and eat well. None of that proves she tried to kill me. It establishes pattern, motive. It shows a woman capable of cruelty. Alara watched him pace, this stranger who'd saved her life and now seemed determined to fix everything. It was almost funny, almost tragic. You don't understand how this works, she said. You're a duke. People believe you because they have to, but I'm no one. The daughter who squandered her inheritance and broke her father's heart. Whatever you say, whatever evidence you find, she'll twist it. Make it about my instability, my desperate need for attention. Then what would you have me do? He stopped pacing, facing her. Let her get away with it? Pretend this didn't happen? I don't know. The admission felt like failure. I just know that fighting her has only ever made things worse. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus entered, his expression grave. Your Grace, Mrs. Vance is requesting an audience. Tell her she has the magistrate with her, and a physician. Adrian's jaw clenched. Of course she does. Alara's stomach dropped. She's building her case. The unstable stepdaughter who tried to harm herself, requiring medical intervention and legal oversight. That's not what happened. Doesn't matter. She's controlling the narrative. Alara stood, her legs unsteady. By tomorrow, half the county will believe I threw myself off that cliff, and you'll be the well-meaning duke who tried to help a disturbed girl. I won't let her. You can't stop her, not without destroying your own reputation in the process. She met his eyes. Think about it. A duke arrives for business, finds a family dispute, gets caught up in dramatics. It makes you look foolish, gullible, bad at judgment. Adrian was silent for a long moment, then, I don't care. You should. Well, I don't. He turned to Marcus. Tell the magistrate I'll speak with him shortly, and tell Mrs. Vance that if she comes near Miss Vance again, I'll have her arrested for attempted murder. Your Grace, Marcus looked uncertain. The magistrate is her cousin. Of course he was. Cordelia had spent years building connections, ensuring loyalty, creating a network of people who owed her favors or feared her influence. Then we'll bring in a magistrate from another county, Adrian said. One she doesn't own. That will take time. Days at least. Then we have days. He looked at Alara. Can you stay here? In the manor? Without being alone with her? I've been staying here for 4 years. That was before she tried to kill you. Before witnesses exposed her. She's desperate now, which makes her dangerous. His voice was hard. I need to know you'll be safe while I arrange proper protection. Alara wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Safe. In this house, where every room held memories of humiliation and every shadow could hide Cordelia's next cruelty. Mrs. Hewitt will watch over me, she said finally. And the other servants, they're not loyal to Cordelia. They're just afraid of her. Fear and loyalty accomplish the same thing. Not always. Adrian studied her face, and Alara had the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing too much. Past the exhaustion and resignation to something underneath, something she'd thought was dead. I'm going to fix this, he said quietly. I know you don't believe me. I know you've learned not to trust promises, but I'm going to fix it anyway. Before she could respond, he left, Marcus trailing behind him. Alara sat back down heavily. Her hands were shaking again. The kitchen felt too large and too small all at once. Mrs. Hewitt returned, her face tight with worry. The magistrate is asking questions, and that physician Cordelia brought, he's saying you need to be evaluated, suggesting you might be a danger to yourself. She works fast. Child, this is serious. If they declare you unfit, then Cordelia gets everything. Full control of the estate, no questions asked, and I disappear into some asylum where inconvenient daughters go to be forgotten. Laura heard her voice come out flat, emotionless. It's actually quite clever. The Duke won't allow him. The Duke is one man. Cordelia has spent years building her power here. He's fighting on her territory with her pieces, playing her game. She stood, steadying herself against the table. I need to think. You need to rest. I need to survive the next few hours without being locked up or drugged or declared incompetent. The anger surprised her, bubbling up hot and sudden. I'm done resting, Mrs. Hewitt. Resting is what got me here. She left the kitchen before the old woman could argue, moving through the servants' quarters with practiced silence. Years of making herself invisible had taught her every quiet path through the manor. Voices drifted from the drawing room, Adrian's measured tones, the magistrate's officious questions, Cordelia's carefully concerned responses. Alara caught fragments as she passed, clearly disturbed for months. My duty as her guardian. Only trying to protect her from herself. Each word was a nail in a coffin. Each sympathetic murmur from the magistrate was another door closing. Alara climbed the stairs to the second floor, to the hallway that had once held her childhood bedroom. Cordelia had claimed that room years ago, redecorated it in shades of cream and gold, erased every trace of Thomas Vance's daughter. But there was another room, one Cordelia didn't know about. Alara's father had been an amateur scholar, collecting books and papers with the enthusiasm of someone who'd come to learning late in life. He'd built himself a small study in a corner of the east wing, accessed through what looked like a linen closet. Alara hadn't been inside since before his death. She opened the linen closet, pushed aside the false back panel, and slipped into the narrow space beyond. The study was exactly as she remembered. Dust covered everything, the desk, the shelves, the papers still scattered where her father had left them. His reading glasses sat beside an open book. A cold cup of tea, long evaporated to residue, marked his last visit. Alara stood in the doorway, throat tight. This room held the ghost of who she'd been. The girl whose father had taught her to read Latin, to debate philosophy, to question everything. The girl who'd had dreams beyond survival. She crossed to the desk and began searching. Her father had been meticulous about records. He'd documented everything: expenses, contracts, correspondence. If there was evidence of what Cordelia had done, if there were answers anywhere, they'd be here. She found the estate accounts first. Her father's neat handwriting covered the pages, tracking every penny spent and earned. Then another set of books, in a different hand. Cordelia's forgeries, carefully created to frame Alara for theft. But her father's originals told a different story. Alara's hands shook as she compared them. Here was the proof that the missing money had been transferred to accounts in Cordelia's name. Here were the forged signatures, the altered dates, the carefully constructed lies. She kept searching. Letters. Dozens of them, from Cordelia to her father during their courtship. Sweet words and careful manipulation, calculated seduction, masquerading as romance. And underneath, in her father's handwriting, doubts he'd never voiced aloud. She asks many questions about the estate's value. Vivian seems afraid of her. I wonder if I've made a mistake. Alara doesn't trust her. My daughter has good instincts. The last entry was dated 2 days before his death. Alara pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting the sob that threatened to break free. He'd known, or suspected, and he died before he could act on it. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Alara froze, listening. The steps were light, hesitant, not Cordelia's sharp heels or the heavy tread of men's boots. Alara? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. Are you here? For a long moment, Alara didn't answer. Vivian was Cordelia's daughter, Cordelia's creature. Anything Alara said would be reported back. Please, I need to talk to you. Against her better judgment, Alara emerged from the study. Vivian stood in the hallway, still dressed in her pink silk, her perfect curls disheveled. She'd been crying. What do you want? To apologize, Vivian's voice cracked, for not stopping her, for not speaking up, for being a coward. You're her daughter. What were you supposed to do? Something, anything. Vivian wrapped her arms around herself. I knew what she was doing to you. I saw it every day. And I told myself it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't help, that speaking up would just make her angry at me too. You were right, it would have. That doesn't make it acceptable. Vivian met her eyes, and for the first time, Ilara saw something real there. Not the porcelain doll her mother had crafted, but a frightened girl trapped in a role she'd never chosen. She's downstairs right now, telling the magistrate you're insane. She has documents prepared, papers that will give her full control of your inheritance and have you committed to an institution. I know. The Duke is fighting it, but the magistrate is already convinced. Mother's been paying him for years. Vivian's hands twisted in her skirts. She's going to win, Ilara. Unless what? Unless someone testifies against her. Someone she can't discredit or control. Vivian took a shaky breath. Someone like her own daughter. Ilara stared at her. She'd destroy you. I know. She'd cut you off, turn society against you, make your life hell. I know. Vivian's chin lifted, and in that moment she looked stronger than Ilara had ever seen her. But I can't be part of this anymore. I can't watch her do this and stay silent. Why now? Why not years ago? Because I was afraid. The admission came out raw. Because I was weak. Because I told myself that being comfortable was worth more than being honest. Vivian's eyes glistened. But today I watched my mother try to murder you. And I did nothing. Just sat in the carriage and did nothing. You couldn't have stopped her. I could have screamed, called for help, something. She shook her head. If I do nothing now, I'm no better than she is. Ilara wanted to trust her, wanted to believe this wasn't another manipulation, another trap. But years of Cordelia's games had taught her to question everything. What would you testify to? She asked carefully. Everything. How she treated you, the things I saw, the beatings, the starvation, the deliberate cruelty. How she forged those documents to frame you for theft. How she talked about you when you weren't there, planning ways to get rid of you. Vivian's voice grew stronger. I'll tell the truth, Ilara. All of it. Even if it ruins me. It will. Then I'll be ruined. She reached out, hesitated, then took Ilara's hand. Please, let me do this one decent thing. Before Ilara could respond, a crash echoed from downstairs. Shouting. Cordelia's voice rising in fury, Adrian's cutting through it like steel. Both girls ran to the staircase. Below, in the entrance hall, chaos had erupted. Adrian stood toe-to-toe with Cordelia, his face carved from stone. The magistrate was trying to intervene, stammering about proper procedure. Mrs. Hewitt had appeared from somewhere, flanked by other servants. And in Adrian's hand he held documents, papers that looked very much like the ones Ilara had just found in her father's study. You broke into my private rooms, Cordelia shrieked. This is outrageous. These are Thomas Vance's papers, Adrian said coldly, found in his private study, documenting your fraud, your forgeries, your systematic theft of his daughter's inheritance. Those could be fabricated. By whom? Your dead husband? Adrian's voice was deadly quiet now. Or perhaps you'll claim Miss Vance created them, despite having no access to her father's study and no knowledge of his handwriting? The magistrate cleared his throat. Your Grace, while these are certainly concerning, they prove motive, Adrian interrupted. They prove a pattern of deception. Combined with 2 witnesses who saw her attempt murder today, they paint a very clear picture. 2 witnesses who are your employees, Cordelia shot back. She'd regained her composure, her face a mask of wounded dignity. Your Grace, I understand you've been deceived. My stepdaughter is very good at playing the victim, at manipulating sympathies, but surely you can see... I can see a woman who's about to be arrested. On what grounds? The word of a disturbed girl and a duke who's been led astray by a pretty face? The hall went deathly silent. Adrian smiled, and it was terrible to see. No, Mrs. Vance, on the testimony of your own daughter. All eyes turned to the staircase. Vivian stood at the top, pale but steady. Ilara was beside her, though she didn't remember moving. Vivian, Cordelia's voice turned honey-sweet. Darling, come down here. This has all been a misunderstanding. No, Mother. Vivian descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. It hasn't. You don't know what you're saying. You're confused. I'm not confused, I'm ashamed. She reached the bottom of the stairs, facing Cordelia directly. I should have spoken up years ago. I should have told someone what you were doing. I was too afraid, too selfish. But I won't be anymore. Cordelia's mask cracked. Be very careful, Vivian. Think about what you're saying. Think about what you'll lose. I've already lost my self-respect. I don't have much else worth keeping. Vivian turned to the magistrate. My mother has been abusing Alara Vance for 4 years. She forged documents, stole from the estate, and today attempted murder. I witnessed all of it, and I'll testify to every detail. The magistrate opened his mouth, closed it, looked between Cordelia and Vivian with growing horror. Cordelia lunged. She moved faster than anyone expected, hands reaching for Vivian's throat. But Adrian was faster. He caught her wrists, wrenching her back with enough force to make her stumble. Don't, he said quietly. Don't make this worse. Cordelia's face twisted into something ugly, all pretense finally abandoned. You self-righteous fool. You think you've won? You think society will forgive this? A duke destroying a respectable widow based on lies from ungrateful children? I think society will judge what the evidence shows. Evidence can be explained. Daughters can be disowned. And you, she turned her fury on Adrian. You'll regret this. I have friends, connections, people who owe me favors. When I'm done, your reputation won't be worth the paper it's printed on. Then we'll both suffer the consequences. Adrian released her wrists, stepping back. But at least I'll be able to sleep at night. He nodded to Marcus, who'd appeared with 2 sturdy-looking men from the village. Take Mrs. Vance into custody. She's to be held pending investigation into fraud, attempted murder, and abuse. You can't do this! Cordelia's voice rose to a shriek. I have rights. I demand. You have the right to remain silent, Adrian said. I suggest you use it. As the men led Cordelia away, still protesting, the hall slowly emptied. The magistrate departed, looking shaken. Mrs. Hewitt ushered the other servants back to their duties. Vivian sank onto the bottom step, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Alara knelt beside her. Thank you. Don't thank me. Not yet. Vivian's voice was barely audible. She was right about one thing. This is going to destroy me. Then we'll be destroyed together. Vivian laughed wetly. That's supposed to be comforting? It's honest. Adrian approached them, his expression softer now. Miss Vivian, what you did took tremendous courage. It took tremendous guilt. She wiped her eyes. I should have done it years ago. But you did it now. That matters. Alara stood, facing him. Her legs felt like water, her head light. Everything that had happened in the last few hours was crashing down on her at once. The attempted murder, the confrontation, the impossible hope that maybe, finally, things might change. What happens now? She asked. Now we make sure the legal proceedings are handled properly. I'll bring in an independent magistrate, ensure the evidence is documented correctly, arrange for proper testimony. He paused. And I'll make sure you're protected, both of you. From Cordelia's connections? Her friends? From anyone who tries to continue her work? His gray eyes held hers. You're not alone anymore, Alara. Neither of you are. The words should have brought comfort. Instead, they terrified her. Being alone, she understood. Being alone meant no expectations, no failures, no hope to be crushed. Having someone on her side meant vulnerability. It meant trusting. It meant the possibility of loss. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. Do what? Be rescued. Be protected. Be... She gestured helplessly. Not alone. Adrian's expression turned gentle. Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the manor's windows. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and heavy with rain. Inside, Alara stood between her stepsister and the Duke who'd saved her life, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she'd known, and felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Not hope exactly. Not yet. But possibility. And for now, that was terrifying enough. The storm broke an hour later, rain lashing against the windows with enough force to rattle the frames. Alara stood in what had been her father's study, watching water stream down the glass, feeling like the weather was finally matching the chaos inside her chest. Adrian had left to arrange accommodations in the village. Somewhere neutral, he'd said, away from the manor and its ghosts. Vivian was in her room packing what she could carry, moving with the mechanical efficiency of someone in shock. The servants moved through the halls, speaking in hushed voices, uncertain what rules still applied now that Cordelia was gone. Alara should have felt relieved, victorious even. Instead, she felt untethered, like a boat cut loose from its moorings with no idea which way the current would take it. "You should eat something." Mrs. Hewitt appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray. Real food this time. Bread that wasn't burnt, cheese that wasn't moldy, tea that steamed in the cup. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten properly in years. Your stomach's probably forgotten what food looks like." The old woman set the tray down firmly. "Eat anyway." Alara picked up the bread, more to satisfy Mrs. Hewitt than from any real appetite. It tasted like dust in her mouth. Everything felt wrong. Too quiet, too still, like the eye of a hurricane where you knew the worst was still coming. "The staff is worried," Mrs. Hewitt said, settling into a chair with a wince. Her hip was bothering her again. "About their positions, about what happens to the manor now." "I don't know what happens now." "You're the heir. It's your estate." The words didn't feel real. Alara had spent so long being nothing, owning nothing, that the idea of suddenly having power felt like a trick, like something that would be snatched away the moment she reached for it. "Cordelia's been managing everything for years. I don't even know what state the finances are in, what debts there might be, what—" She stopped, overwhelmed. "I can't do this." "You can. You're your father's daughter." "My father trusted the wrong woman and it killed him." Mrs. Hewitt's expression softened. "Your father was a good man who made one mistake. Don't let that mistake define you." Before Alara could respond, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Marcus burst into the room, rain-soaked and breathing hard. "Where's Miss Vance?" Alara stood quickly. "What's wrong?" "It's Mrs. Vance. She's escaped." The words hung in the air for a moment, not quite making sense. "How?" Mrs. Hewitt demanded. "She was under guard. The magistrate released her, said there wasn't enough evidence to hold her without formal charges being filed." Marcus's face was grim. "By the time we found out, she'd already left the village, taken a horse and disappeared." Alara's blood went cold. "Where's Vivian?" "Still in her room, last I saw." Alara was moving before he finished the sentence, running down the hallway with her heart hammering against her ribs. Cordelia wouldn't just run. She'd been exposed, humiliated, stripped of everything she'd built. And Cordelia had never taken defeat gracefully. She'd want revenge first. Vivian's door was open. The room beyond was dark, curtains drawn against the storm. Alara stepped inside, squinting in the gloom. "Vivian?" No answer. She moved deeper into the room, navigating around furniture she knew by memory. The wardrobe stood open, half empty. Vivian's traveling bag lay on the bed, partially packed. Then Alara saw the window, open despite the rain, curtains whipping in the wind, and blood on the windowsill. "No!" The word came out strangled. She rushed to the window, leaning out into the storm. Below, the garden stretched dark and rain-swept. No sign of movement, no figure running across the grounds. But there, caught on the trellis below the window, a scrap of pink silk. Marcus appeared behind her, swearing when he saw the open window. "She took her. Cordelia took her own daughter." "We have to find them. In this weather? In the dark?" Marcus shook his head. "We don't even know which direction they went." "Then we search all directions." Alara turned to face him, and something in her voice must have been fierce because Marcus actually stepped back. "That woman has spent 4 years making my life hell. I'm not letting her hurt anyone else." "Miss Vance, be reasonable." "I'm done being reasonable. Reasonable got me starved and beaten and nearly killed. Now someone help me find a lantern and a coat, or get out of my way." Mrs. Hewitt appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "The horses are gone. All of them except the old mare, and she's lame." Alara wanted to scream, wanted to put her fist through the wall, through something, anything. But rage wouldn't help Vivian. Rage was what Cordelia expected, wild emotion that could be used against her. She forced herself to think. Where would Cordelia go? Not the village, where Adrian had allies. Not the main roads, where she could be easily followed. Somewhere isolated, somewhere she could hide, or the cottage. Alara's breath caught. The old groundskeeper's cottage, on the north edge of the property. Marcus frowned. I thought that place was abandoned. It is, but Cordelia used to meet someone there. I saw her once, about a year ago, when I was gathering wood. Alara grabbed her father's coat from where it hung over a chair. She didn't know I saw, but I watched her go inside, and whoever she was meeting, they stayed for hours. That doesn't mean it's isolated. It's on Vance's property, so she'd know the path even in the dark, and it's close to the cliff paths. Alara's stomach twisted. If she wanted to hurt Vivian to make a point about betrayal, she didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Marcus was already moving toward the stairs. I'll get torches. You stay here. I'm coming with you. Miss Vance, she's my stepsister, and this is my fault. The admission hurt to say. If I'd just kept quiet, if I'd let things stay as they were, then you'd be dead, Mrs. Hewitt interrupted sharply. And Vivian would still be trapped in her mother's shadow. This isn't your fault, child. This is Cordelia's choice. Maybe. But that didn't make Alara feel any less responsible. They gathered what they could. 2 working lanterns, rain cloaks, a knife from the kitchen that Mrs. Hewitt pressed into Alara's hand despite her protests. Marcus sent one of the stable boys running to the village to alert Adrian, though in this weather it would take time for anyone to arrive. Time they might not have. The path to the old cottage was barely visible, overgrown with brambles and slick with rain. Alara led the way, her lantern throwing wild shadows across the trees. Every sound made her jump, branches cracking, rain hammering leaves, the distant boom of thunder over the ocean. How much further? Marcus called over the storm. 1/2 mile, maybe less. Her feet slipped on the muddy path and she caught herself against a tree, bark rough under her palms. The knife at her belt felt both foolish and necessary. What was she planning to do with it? Threaten Cordelia? The woman who'd spent years breaking her down wouldn't be intimidated by a kitchen blade, but having it made Alara feel slightly less helpless. The cottage appeared through the trees like something from a nightmare. Stone walls dark with rain, windows gaping empty, door hanging crooked on broken hinges. No light showed from inside, no smoke from the chimney. Looks abandoned, Marcus whispered. Alara wasn't so sure. There was something too deliberate about the darkness, the silence, like the cottage was holding its breath. They approached slowly, boots squelching in the mud. Marcus went first, one hand on the sword at his hip. Alara followed close behind, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The door creaked open at Marcus's touch. Inside, darkness and the smell of old decay. Their lantern light revealed a single room, bare floor, collapsed furniture, holes in the roof where rain dripped steadily through. Empty. She's not here, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. But Alara was already moving toward the back of the cottage, where another door stood half open. Stone steps led down into darkness. A cellar, or maybe a storage room. And from below, very faint, the sound of crying. Vivian! Alara started down the steps before Marcus could stop her. The cellar was small and damp, water pooling on the stone floor. Vivian sat against the far wall, hands bound, a gag in her mouth. Her eyes went wide when she saw Alara, and she made a muffled sound of warning. Too late, Alara realized the trap. Something crashed into the back of her head. Pain exploded through her skull, and she went down hard, the lantern flying from her hand. It hit the stone floor and shattered, plunging the cellar into darkness. Above her, Marcus shouted, the sound of a scuffle, boots on stone, someone hitting the wall hard. Then silence. Alara tried to push herself up, but the world tilted violently. Nausea rolled through her stomach. She managed to get to her knees before hands grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. Stupid girl. Cordelia's voice was cold and clear in the darkness. Did you really think I'd just run away? A match flared, illuminating Cordelia's face. She looked different now, hair wild, dress torn, the careful mask she'd worn for years completely shattered. This was the real woman underneath, cruel and calculating and entirely without remorse. She lit a lantern that had been waiting in the corner, casting dancing shadows across the cellar walls. Marcus lay crumpled near the stairs, blood running down his face. Unconscious or dead, Alara couldn't tell. What are you going to do? Alara's voice came out steady, despite the fear flooding her veins. Kill us all? That won't get you your life back. No, but it will satisfy me. Cordelia released Alara's hair with a shove. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? Years of work, years of planning, all destroyed because you couldn't just die quietly. You tried to murder me. Because you were ruining everything. Cordelia's voice rose, echoing off the stone walls. That Duke, asking questions, paying attention to you. I saw the way he looked at you, like you mattered, like you were worth saving. She laughed, bitter and harsh. You're not worth saving, Alara. You're weak, pathetic. Your father knew it. That's why he was so easy to manipulate. One sweet widow telling him what he wanted to hear, and he forgot all about being careful. Alara's hands clenched into fists. You killed him. I helped him have an unfortunate accident. There's a difference. Cordelia pulled something from her pocket. In the lantern light, metal gleamed. A pistol, small but deadly. He was going to change his will. Did you know that? 2 days before he died, he told me he was cutting me out, leaving everything to you. Said he'd made a mistake, that I wasn't who he thought I was. The revelation hit Alara like a physical blow. Her father had known, had tried to protect her, and Cordelia had killed him for it. So yes, I arranged his death, and yes, I planned to take everything that should have been mine, and I would have succeeded if you'd had the decency to stay broken. Cordelia's finger moved to the trigger, but you didn't. You found allies. You fought back. You made me look like a fool in front of people who matter. So now what? Alara pushed herself to her feet, swaying but standing. You shoot me? Shoot Vivian? Your own daughter? She's not my daughter anymore. She chose you over me. Cordelia glanced at Vivian, who was sobbing behind her gag. Ungrateful little traitor. I gave her everything. Status, beauty, prospects, and she threw it away to play hero. The gun swung toward Vivian. Alara moved without thinking, throwing herself forward. The gun went off, deafening in the confined space. Pain seared across Alara's shoulder and she crashed into Cordelia, both of them going down in a tangle of limbs and fury. They hit the ground hard. Alara felt her injured shoulder scream in protest, but she held on, grappling for the gun. Cordelia was stronger than she looked, driven by desperation and rage. Her fingers dug into Alara's throat, cutting off air. Black spots danced across Alara's vision. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her hand found the knife at her belt, and she pulled it free, slashing wildly. The blade caught Cordelia's arm and the woman screamed, releasing her grip. Alara gasped for air, rolling away. Her shoulder was bleeding, warm blood soaking through her sleeve. The gun had skittered away somewhere in the darkness. Cordelia was already moving, scrambling toward where the pistol had fallen. Alara lunged after her, tackling her from behind. They crashed into the wall, stone scraping skin. I should have killed you years ago, Cordelia hissed, elbowing Alara in the ribs. Should have made it look like an illness, something slow and quiet. You should have left me alone. Alara got an arm around Cordelia's throat, pulling back hard. Should have taken what you had and been satisfied. I'm never satisfied. That's what makes me strong and you weak. They struggled in the lantern light, two women locked in a battle that had been years in the making. Alara was younger, but Cordelia was vicious, fighting like someone with nothing left to lose. Footsteps on the stairs made them both freeze. Adrian appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with a single glance. Marcus unconscious, Vivian bound and sobbing, Alara and Cordelia locked together with blood on both of them. Let her go, he said quietly. Cordelia laughed. Or what? You'll shoot me? We both know you won't. You're right, I won't. He descended the last few steps. But you're also going to let her go. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. Every detail, every crime, every manipulation. I'll destroy whatever reputation you have left. You'll do that anyway. Maybe. But if you let her go now, I'll make sure the trial is quick, quiet. You'll be sent away, but you won't be publicly humiliated. His eyes were hard as stone. Hurt her more, and I'll make sure your downfall is as public and painful as possible. For a long moment, Cordelia didn't move. Then slowly she released Alara. Alara stumbled forward, caught by Adrian's steadying hand. Her shoulder throbbed, her throat ached, and her whole body was shaking with exhaustion and shock. Marcus, she managed. Breathing. He'll be fine. Adrian kept himself between her and Cordelia. Can you untie Vivian? Alara nodded, moving to her stepsister on unsteady legs. Her fingers fumbled with the knots, slippery with blood. Finally, the ropes came free. Vivian tore the gag from her mouth and immediately started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole frame. Alara pulled her close, holding tight despite the pain in her shoulder. You're all right. You're safe now. Behind them, Adrian was securing Cordelia's hands with rope Marcus must have brought. The older woman didn't resist, all the fight suddenly gone out of her. She looked smaller now, diminished. Just a woman who'd wanted more than she had and destroyed lives trying to get it. I would have given you everything, she said quietly, staring at nothing. If you'd just been grateful. If you'd just accepted your place. Alara met her eyes. My place was never at your feet. No, your place was in the ground next to your father. Cordelia's smile was terrible. I failed at that. But don't think you've won. People like you don't win. You're too soft, too trusting. Someone will take advantage eventually. Maybe. Alara straightened, still holding Vivian, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Adrian finished with the ropes and helped Marcus to his feet. The younger man was groggy but conscious, touching the lump on his head with a wince. We need to get you both to a doctor, Adrian said, looking between Alara and Marcus. That shoulder needs proper care. Vivian first. I'm fine, Vivian said shakily. Just scared. You're the one bleeding. Alara looked down. Her sleeve was soaked through, blood dripping onto the floor. The adrenaline was wearing off now, replaced by a deep, throbbing pain that made her vision swim. Can you walk? Adrian asked. I think so. She took 2 steps and her legs gave out. Adrian caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily despite her protests. I can walk. You can't. Stop arguing. His voice was gentle despite the words. You just fought a woman who tried to kill you twice in one day. You're allowed to be weak for 5 minutes. The world tilted as he carried her up the stairs. Rain hit her face, cold and clean, washing away the blood and the fear. Behind them, Marcus was helping Vivian while keeping a grip on Cordelia's bound arms. Through the trees, lights appeared. Villagers with torches, responding to Marcus's earlier message. Voices called out, asking questions. Adrian answered them in that calm, commanding way he had, organizing people to help. Alara let her head rest against his shoulder, too exhausted to care about propriety or appearance. The storm was passing, clouds breaking to reveal stars between the rain. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For coming back. For not giving up. I told you I'd fix this. His arms tightened slightly around her. I keep my promises. They emerged from the trees to find what looked like half the village gathered outside the cottage. Someone had brought a cart. Adrian settled Alara into it carefully, Vivian climbing up beside her. Cordelia was placed in a separate cart, guards on either side. She didn't speak, didn't struggle, just stared ahead with empty eyes, already rehearsing whatever story she'd tell at trial. The ride back to the village was a blur of pain and exhaustion. Someone gave Alara water. Someone else wrapped a proper bandage around her shoulder. Vivian held her hand the whole way, not speaking, just being there. The village doctor was waiting when they arrived, a stern older woman who took one look at Alara's shoulder and started issuing orders. The bullet had grazed rather than embedded, she announced. Painful but not serious. It would heal. Everything would heal, given time. Alara sat in the doctor's surgery while her wound was cleaned and properly dressed, listening to the rain finally stop outside. Vivian was in the next room being examined for injuries. Adrian was somewhere coordinating with the new magistrate, a man from the county seat who had no connection to Cordelia. For the first time in 4 years, Alara was safe. The realization should have brought relief. Instead, she felt numb, empty. Like she'd spent so long bracing for the next blow that she didn't know how to exist without that constant tension. You'll need to rest, the doctor said, securing the last of the bandages. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity, and you need proper food, proper sleep. You're half-starved. I know. Then start taking care of yourself. You survived for a reason. Don't waste it. Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. Adrian found her afterward, sitting on the doctor's porch watching the stars emerge. He settled beside her without asking permission, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Cordelia's being held in the magistrate's office. She'll be transferred to the county jail tomorrow. He paused. The new magistrate wants your testimony. Vivian's too. Says with the evidence we have, there's enough for multiple charges: fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy. Will it stick? Yes, I'll make sure of it. Alara believed him. Adrian had that quality. When he said something would happen, you trusted it would. What happens to the estate? She asked. To Vance Manor? It's yours. Always was, legally. Cordelia never had a legitimate claim. Your father's will was clear. She just managed to convince everyone otherwise. He looked at her. You could sell it, start fresh somewhere else. I could. But you won't. It was my father's home, his legacy. Alara pulled her father's coat tighter around her shoulders. I can't just abandon it. Even after everything that happened there, especially after everything that happened there, someone needs to make it a home again. Might as well be me. Adrian smiled, small but genuine. You're stronger than you think. I'm terrified. That's not mutually exclusive. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the village settle for the night. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. Someone laughed. Normal sounds of normal life, continuing on despite the drama that had unfolded. What made you come back? Alara asked. To the cottage, I mean. We sent word, but you arrived so fast. I never left. Marcus was supposed to secure accommodations, but I stayed nearby, watching. Adrian's expression turned grim. I knew Cordelia wouldn't just run. People like her, they need the last word. I was afraid she'd come back for you or Vivian. You were right. I wish I'd been wrong. Alara turned to look at him properly. In the lamplight, his face was all sharp angles and tired eyes. He'd risked a lot for her, his reputation, his time, possibly his life in that cellar. Why? The question came out before she could stop it. Why what? Why help me? You didn't know me, had no obligation. You could have walked away from all of this. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. 5 years ago, my sister died. She was married to a man who seemed respectable, charming. Behind closed doors, he was a monster. His jaw tightened. She tried to tell people. No one believed her. They said she was dramatic, seeking attention, causing problems in a good marriage. What happened? She killed herself. Left a note explaining everything, the abuse, the isolation, the ways he'd systematically destroyed her. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. After she died, people finally believed her. Started investigating, found evidence she'd been telling the truth all along. I'm sorry. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand why I couldn't walk away. He met her eyes. When I saw Cordelia push you, when I heard the way she spoke about you, I saw my sister. Saw what happens when people in power decide someone doesn't matter. Alara didn't know what to say to that. The weight of his grief, his guilt, his determination, it was too much to absorb. You saved me because of her, she said quietly. I saved you because it was right. My sister just made sure I wouldn't hesitate. He stood, offering his hand. Come on, the doctor said you need rest. Alara let him help her up, wincing as her shoulder protested. Everything hurt, her head, her throat, the bullet graze, but underneath the pain was something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. They walked back toward the inn where rooms had been prepared. Vivian was already there, Mrs. Hewitt fussing over her despite the girl's protests. The familiar sounds of care and concern washed over Alara as she entered. This was what safety felt like, what family could be. Adrian stopped at the door to her room. If you need anything, I know, thank you. He nodded and turned to leave. Adrian? The name felt strange in her mouth, too familiar, too intimate, but he'd asked her to use it. Your sister, what was her name? Catherine. Why? I just wanted to know, wanted to remember who I owe my life to. His expression softened. You don't owe her anything, but I think she would have liked you. Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone in a room with clean sheets, warm blankets, and a lock on the door that actually worked. She should have slept, should have rested like everyone kept insisting. Instead, she stood at the window watching the village at night, thinking about tomorrow and the day after and all the days stretching out ahead of her. Days where she'd have to rebuild her life. Days where she'd have to face the consequences of Cordelia's actions and her own choices. Days where she'd have to figure out who Alara Vance was when she wasn't just surviving. The thought was overwhelming, but for the first time in 4 years, it was also exciting. She was free. Truly, completely free. And she had no idea what to do with that freedom. Somewhere in the darkness, a clock struck midnight. A new day beginning. A new life waiting. Alara pressed her hand against the cool glass and made herself a promise. Whatever came next, she would face it standing up. No more cowering, no more accepting, no more making herself small. Cordelia had tried to erase her, had nearly succeeded. But Alara was still here, still breathing, still fighting. And that would have to be enough. For now. The door to her room burst open. Alara spun, heart hammering, reaching instinctively for the knife she no longer carried. But it was only Vivian, pale and shaking, her eyes wild with fear. "She's gone," Vivian gasped. "My mother, they just came to tell me. Someone helped her escape from the magistrate's office. They don't know who, but she's gone, and they found a note." She thrust a crumpled paper at Alara. The handwriting was Cordelia's, sharp and precise. "This isn't over. You took everything from me. Now I'll take everything from you, both of you, starting with what you love most." Alara's blood turned to ice. "Adrian! Where's Adrian?" They ran. They ran. Alara's shoulder screamed in protest with every step, but she didn't slow down. Vivian kept pace beside her, both of them tearing through the inn's narrow hallways toward Adrian's room. Doors opened as they passed, startled faces peering out, but Alara didn't stop to explain. She pounded on Adrian's door. "Hey, Adrian! Open up!" No response. She tried the handle. Locked. "Break it down," Vivian said, her voice high with panic. "Stand back." Marcus appeared from somewhere, still sporting a bandage around his head from the cottage. He threw his shoulder against the door, once, twice. The third time, the lock gave way and the door crashed inward. The room was empty. Bed made. No signs of struggle, nothing disturbed. But Adrian's coat was still hanging on the chair, his boots by the door. He hadn't left of his own accord. "Check the other rooms," Alara ordered, her mind racing. "Mrs. Hewitt, the servants, everyone. Make sure they're safe." Marcus nodded and disappeared. Alara moved to the window, scanning the dark street below. The village was quiet, most people already asleep. Nothing moved except shadows cast by the street lamps. "She has him," Vivian whispered. "My mother has him." "We don't know that." The note said, "What you love most." "She saw the way you two looked at each other. She knows." Vivian's hands shook as she held up the crumpled paper again. "And she'll kill him to hurt you." Alara wanted to deny it, wanted to insist there was nothing between her and Adrian beyond gratitude and circumstance. But Vivian was right. Something had shifted between them in the past day, something fragile and unnamed but real enough that Cordelia would have noticed, real enough to weaponize. Where would she take him? Alara asked, forcing herself to think past the fear. She escaped less than an hour ago. She can't have gone far, not with a prisoner. The manor? Vivian suggested. She knows every hiding place there. Too obvious. Adrian sent people to secure it after she was arrested. Alara paced the small room, trying to think like Cordelia. Where would a desperate woman take a captive when she had limited time and resources? Then it hit her. The cliff. Vivian's face went white. No. It's poetic in her twisted mind. She tried to kill me there and failed. Now she finishes what she started by taking something from me in the same place. Alara was already moving toward the door. It's exactly the kind of symbolic cruelty she'd enjoy. That's a mile away through rough terrain. How would she even get him there? The same way she got me there. Force and manipulation. Tell him someone's hurt, someone needs help, anything to get him moving. Once they're isolated. Alara didn't finish the thought. Marcus returned slightly out of breath. Everyone else is accounted for, but one of the stable boys said he saw a woman matching Mrs. Vance's description heading north about 30 minutes ago. She had a man with her, looked like he was injured or drugged. North, toward the cliffs. Get horses, Alara said. Whatever you can find, and weapons. Anything. Miss Vance, you're in no condition. I don't care. The words came out sharp as broken glass. That woman has taken everything from me. My father, my home, 4 years of my life. I'm not letting her take one more thing. Now get the horses or get out of my way. Something in her voice must have convinced him because Marcus nodded and left without further argument. Alara turned to Vivian. You should stay here. Absolutely not. She's your mother. This is going to be... I know exactly what it's going to be. That's why I'm coming. Vivian's jaw set in a way that reminded Alara eerily of Cordelia. She's going to prison for the rest of her life if she's lucky. If not, she'll hang. Either way, I need to face her. Tell her to her face that I'm done being her daughter. There was no time to argue. They met Marcus in the street where he'd managed to procure 3 horses and a collection of improvised weapons. A hunting rifle, 2 knives, and a heavy walking stick that could double as a club. The magistrate's gathering a proper search party, Marcus said as they mounted. But that'll take time we don't have. Then we don't wait. Alara took the rifle despite never having fired one in her life. It felt heavy and foreign in her hands, but having it was better than going unarmed. They rode hard through the darkness, following the path toward the cliffs. The moon was up now, nearly full, casting everything in silver and shadow. Alara's shoulder throbbed with each jarring step the horse took, but she gritted her teeth and held on. The path narrowed as they climbed, forcing them to slow down. Below, the ocean roared against the rocks, loud enough to drown out conversation. Above, the sky stretched vast and uncaring. Vivian pulled her horse alongside Alara's. What if we're wrong? What if she didn't take him to the cliffs? Then we keep looking until we find him. And if we're too late? Alara didn't answer. Couldn't. The possibility sat in her chest like a stone, but acknowledging it out loud would make it too real. They rounded a bend, and Marcus held up a hand, signaling them to stop. He dismounted quietly, examining something on the ground. When he looked up, his face was grim. Fresh tracks, 2 people, one dragging their feet, heading toward the overlook. The overlook. The exact spot where Cordelia had tried to kill Alara just that morning. Full circle, poetic and cruel. They left the horses and continued on foot, moving as quietly as possible over the rocky ground. The path became treacherous here, barely more than a ledge with a sheer drop on one side. One wrong step and it was 100 feet down to the rocks below. Alara's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every shadow looked like a person, every sound like a threat. Her injured shoulder made her clumsy, balance off, but she pushed forward anyway. Then she heard it, Cordelia's voice, carrying on the wind. Thought you were so clever. Coming here, playing the hero, rescuing the poor mistreated girl. Alara motioned for the others to stop. They were close now, maybe 50 feet from the overlook. She could see figures moving in the moonlight, 2 people standing near the cliff's edge. Mrs. Vance, this is pointless. Adrian's voice, strained but steady. Even if you kill me, you won't escape. The entire county is looking for you. I don't need to escape. I just need to make them hurt the way they made me hurt. Cordelia's laugh was high and brittle. You think you saved her. You just gave her hope. And when I take you away, when she has to live knowing she got you killed, that's a wound that will never heal. Alara felt Vivian tense beside her. She put a hand on her stepsister's arm, squeezing gently. Not yet. They needed to get closer, needed to see the situation clearly before making a move. They crept forward, using the rocks for cover. Now Alara could see them properly. Adrian standing at the very edge of the cliff, Cordelia behind him with something pressed against his back. A knife, probably, or maybe another gun. Adrian's hands were bound in front of him. Blood ran down the side of his face from a wound at his temple. But he was standing, alert, watching Cordelia with the careful attention of someone looking for an opening. You know what the ironic part is, Cordelia was saying? I actually admired you at first. A duke who did his own investigating, who didn't just trust what he was told. I thought we might have worked well together. Work together how? Partnership. You provide legitimacy and connections. I provide strategy and ruthlessness. We could have built something remarkable. She laughed again. But then you had to go and develop a conscience. Had to care about some pathetic girl who was never going to amount to anything. That pathetic girl survived 4 years of your abuse and still has more integrity than you'll ever possess. The knife pressed harder into his back. Careful. You're in no position to insult me. I'm in a position where nothing I say matters. You're going to kill me regardless. Adrian's voice was calm, almost conversational. So forgive me if I use my last words to tell you exactly what I think of you. Alara was close enough now to see Cordelia's face, twisted with rage and something that might have been pain. She looked smaller than she had in the manor, diminished by desperation and the knowledge that she'd already lost. You want to know what I think? Adrian continued. I think you're terrified, not of punishment or justice, but of being forgotten. You've spent your whole life trying to be important, to matter. And the thought that you might just disappear, that's what really scares you. Shut up. That's why you can't just run away. Why you had to come back, had to make some grand gesture. Because if you just disappeared, who would remember Cordelia Vance? Who would care? I said shut up. Cordelia shoved him forward, closer to the edge. Adrian stumbled, his bound hands making it impossible to catch himself properly. He went down on one knee, inches from the drop. Alara raised the rifle without thinking, sighting down the barrel at Cordelia's back. Her hands shook. The weapon felt impossible, like trying to hold thunder. Don't, Marcus whispered beside her. You might hit his grace. He was right. Even if Alara knew how to shoot, which she didn't, the angle was wrong. One mistake and Adrian would fall. But she couldn't just stand here watching either. We need a distraction, Vivian breathed. Something to get her attention away from him. Before Alara could respond, Vivian was moving, stepping out from behind the rocks into the moonlight. Mother! Cordelia spun, the knife arcing away from Adrian. In that split second of distraction, Adrian lunged sideways, rolling away from the cliff edge despite his bound hands. Cordelia recovered fast, but her focus had shifted entirely to Vivienne. You did this. You destroyed everything. I told the truth. That's not the same thing. You betrayed me, your own mother. After everything I gave you, you gave me fear. Vivian's voice cracked. You gave me impossible standards and conditional love and the constant terror that one wrong move would make you turn on me the way you turned on Alara. Cordelia took a step toward her daughter, knife still in hand. Ungrateful child, I made you beautiful, accomplished, perfect. You made me a doll, a pretty thing to display when it suited you and put away when it didn't. Vivian was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I loved you. I wanted so badly for you to love me back. But you're not capable of love, are you? Just possession, control. Love is for the weak. Then I'm weak, and I'd rather be weak and kind than strong and cruel like you. The words hung in the air between them. Cordelia's face went through a dozen emotions: rage, hurt, calculation, dismissal. Finally, she laughed. Fine. You want to stand with her? With them? Then you can die with them. She raised the knife and charged. Alara fired. The rifle kicked back hard enough to knock her off her feet. The shot went wide, missing Cordelia entirely, but close enough to make her stumble. It bought Vivian precious seconds to dodge sideways, away from her mother's blade. Adrian was up now, hands still bound, but using them together like a club. He caught Cordelia in the ribs as she passed, the impact spinning her around. She slashed at him wildly, and he jerked back, the knife catching his sleeve but not flesh. Marcus was running forward, club raised. Alara scrambled to reload the rifle, but her hands were shaking too badly, the mechanism foreign and complex. Cordelia recovered her balance and lunged for Vivian again. This time her daughter couldn't dodge fast enough. The knife scored across Vivian's arm and she cried out, stumbling backward, right toward the cliff edge. No! Alara dropped the rifle and ran. Everything happened in the space of a heartbeat. Vivian's foot caught on loose stone and she teetered on the edge, arms windmilling. Cordelia stood frozen, watching her daughter about to fall with an expression that might have been horror or satisfaction. Alara hit Vivian at full speed, both of them going down in a tangle of limbs. They landed hard on solid ground, inches from the drop, Alara's injured shoulder taking most of the impact. Pain whited out her vision for a moment. When it cleared, Marcus had Cordelia pinned against a rock, the club across her throat. Adrian was cutting his bonds on a sharp stone, fingers working quickly despite the blood running down his arm. It's over, Marcus said, his voice hard. It's done. Cordelia struggled for a moment longer, then went limp. not in surrender, but in exhaustion. The fight drained out of her all at once, leaving behind just a woman who'd gambled everything and lost. "It's not over," she said quietly. "It will never be over. Even in prison, even dead, I'll have won, because you'll never forget me. None of you will. Every time you look in the mirror, every time you're happy or safe or loved, you'll remember what I did to you. You'll remember that I had that power." Alara pulled herself up slowly, helping Vivian to her feet. Her stepsister was shaking, bleeding from the shallow cut on her arm, but otherwise unharmed. "You're wrong," Alara said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "You'll be a cautionary tale, a lesson in what happens when cruelty becomes someone's only language. But you won't be important. You won't matter." "I matter. I always—" "You're already forgotten." Alara turned away, dismissing Cordelia as completely as Cordelia had once dismissed her. "Take her back to the magistrate. Make sure she actually reaches the jail this time." Marcus hauled Cordelia to her feet. She didn't resist, didn't speak, just stared at Alara with hollow eyes. Whatever she'd been hoping for, fear, anger, acknowledgement, she wasn't getting it. Adrian approached Alara carefully, his freed hands gentle as he touched her uninjured shoulder. "Are you all right?" "Are you?" He smiled, tired and pained. "I've been better, but I'm alive, which is more than I expected 20 minutes ago." "She drugged you?" "Hit me over the head, actually. Used a chunk of firewood." He touched the wound at his temple gingerly. "I'm getting too old to be knocked unconscious this often." "You're not old." "I feel old right now." Alara looked at him properly, at the blood drying on his face, the torn sleeve, the way he was favoring his left side. He'd been captured, threatened, nearly killed, all because Cordelia had seen him as leverage against her. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For dragging you into this. For making you a target." Adrian's expression softened. "Alara, I walked into this with my eyes open. You didn't drag me anywhere." "Still." "No." He cut her off gently. "You've spent enough of your life apologizing for things that weren't your fault. Don't start adding me to that list." Behind them, Marcus was leading Cordelia away. Vivian stood at the cliff's edge, staring out at the ocean. The wind whipped her hair around her face, making her look wild and fragile all at once. Alara walked over to her, moving slowly thanks to her protesting shoulder. "You all right?" "I don't know what I am." Vivian's voice was hollow. "She was going to let me fall. Did you see her face? She was going to watch me die. I saw. I always knew, on some level, that her love was conditional, but I didn't think—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "I didn't think the condition was that I could never disagree with her, that the moment I chose someone else over her, I stopped being her daughter entirely. That's not how family works. How would either of us know? Your father was taken from you, and my mother—" Vivian laughed, bitter. "My mother was never really a mother at all." Alara took her hand, squeezing gently. "Then we'll figure it out together, make our own version of family, one that doesn't require perfection or obedience or fear. Is that possible? I don't know, but I'd like to try." They stood there for a moment, two girls who'd been shaped by cruelty but refused to let it define them. The ocean roared below, eternal and uncaring. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Adrian joined them, keeping a respectful distance. "The magistrate's people are on their way. They'll want statements from all of us." "How long until she faces trial?" Alara asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month. Depends on how backed up the courts are." He paused. "But with the evidence we have, the witnesses, the documentation, there's no question about the outcome. She'll be convicted. And then?" "Prison, probably for the rest of her life." His voice was matter-of-fact, neither pleased nor sympathetic, just stating reality. "The days of her having any power over either of you are finished." The word should have brought relief. Victory. Instead, Alara just felt tired, worn down to the bone by a fight that had lasted years and culminated in one impossibly long day. "What happens to the manor?" Vivian asked. "To the estate?" "It's Alara's," Adrian said. "Always was, legally. Your mother never had legitimate claim to it." "I don't know the first thing about running an estate." Neither did I when I inherited mine. You learn. He smiled slightly. And you hire people who know what they're doing to help you until you do. Alara thought about Vance Manor, that huge cold house that held so many painful memories. The thought of returning there, of living in those rooms again, made her stomach turn. But it was also her father's legacy. His dream. The place he'd hoped to turn into a home. Maybe, with time and work and the ghosts finally laid to rest, it could be that. I'll need help, she said quietly. I can't do this alone. You won't be alone. Adrian's voice was firm. I'll help however I can. Advice, connections, resources, whatever you need. Why? The question came out before Alara could stop it. Why keep helping? You've already done so much, risked so much. You don't owe me anything. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. When my sister died, I swore I'd never stand by again while someone suffered. That if I had the power to help, I would use it. He met her eyes. But it's more than that with you. You're not just someone who needs help. You're someone who deserves better than what you've been given. And He stopped, seeming uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. You what? Alara's heart was beating faster than it should. I care what happens to you. Not as an obligation or a duty, but because somewhere in the last day you stopped being a rescue and started being... He trailed off, looking frustrated with himself. I'm explaining this badly. You're explaining it fine. I don't want to take advantage. You're vulnerable right now in transition. The last thing you need is someone pushing feelings on you that you might not... Alara kissed him. It wasn't graceful or romantic. She was injured and exhausted. He was bleeding and probably concussed, and she had to stand on her toes to reach him properly. But when their lips met, something clicked into place. Something that felt right in a way very little had felt right in years. When they broke apart, Adrian looked stunned. Oh. Alara couldn't help but smile despite everything. That's all you've got? I was trying to be respectful. Appropriate. A smile tugged at his mouth. You're making that difficult. Good. Vivian cleared her throat loudly. I'm still standing right here. Sorry, Alara said, not feeling sorry at all. Don't be. It's about time one of us did something impulsive that wasn't terrible. Vivian's smile was watery but genuine. Just warn me next time so I can look away. Voices drifted up from the path below, the magistrate's people finally arriving. Reality was reasserting itself, demands and questions and the messy work of justice. But for just this moment, standing on the cliff where everything had almost ended, Alara let herself feel hopeful. Not the fragile, frightened hope of someone afraid to want anything, but the solid, determined hope of someone who'd survived hell and came out still capable of choosing kindness, still capable of choosing to try. The magistrate himself appeared, slightly out of breath from the climb. He was younger than Alara expected, with sharp eyes that took in the scene efficiently. Miss Vance, Your Grace. I apologize for the delay in securing Mrs. Vance properly the first time. That error has cost. It's done now, Adrian interrupted. The important thing is making sure it doesn't happen again. Agreed. I've arranged for her to be held in the county jail under guard until trial. No visitors, no correspondence, no possibility of escape or outside influence. He pulled out a notebook. I'll need full statements from each of you about tonight's events, as well as anything else relevant to the charges against her. They spent the next hour going over everything, the escape, the note, the confrontation at the cliff. The magistrate wrote it all down in meticulous detail, occasionally asking clarifying questions. By the time they were done, the sky was starting to lighten in the east. Dawn coming whether they were ready for it or not. The ride back to the village was quiet. Alara's shoulder had gone from painful to numb, which probably wasn't a good sign. Vivian rode beside her, silent and withdrawn. Adrian kept looking over at them like he was making sure they were still there, still real, still alive. The doctor was waiting at the inn, roused from her bed by the commotion. She took one look at the three of them and started issuing orders. You, she pointed at Adrian, sit down before you fall down. That head wound needs proper cleaning. You, turning to Vivian, let me see that arm. And you, her finger landed on Alara. You were supposed to be resting. What part of no strenuous activity was unclear? The part where someone was in danger, Alara said. Brave and stupid often look the same. But the doctor's hands were gentle as she examined Alara's shoulder. You've torn some of the stitching. Nothing catastrophic, but it'll scar worse now. I can live with scars. Apparently. The doctor rebandaged the wound with quick efficiency. Now actually rest. I mean it this time. No more heroics for at least 24 hours. Alara nodded, too exhausted to argue. The adrenaline had worn off completely, leaving behind bone-deep fatigue that made even standing feel like too much work. Mrs. Hewitt appeared with food, real food, warm and plentiful. Bread and cheese and soup that steamed in the bowl. Alara ate mechanically, barely tasting it, while conversation swirled around her. Finally, the doctor declared them all patched up enough to sleep and shooed everyone out except the patients. Alara found herself back in her room, the same room she'd left in a panic what felt like years ago, but had only been hours. She should sleep. Her body was screaming for it, every muscle heavy with exhaustion. But her mind wouldn't settle, kept replaying the events of the night in fragmented loops. A soft knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Come in. Adrian entered, looking slightly better now that the blood had been cleaned from his face and his wounds properly dressed. He'd changed shirts, though his hair was still disheveled and there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Too much has happened. My brain can't catch up. He nodded understanding and settled into the chair by the window. For a moment they just sat in comfortable silence. About earlier, Adrian said finally, on the cliff. I don't want you to think I expect anything. You were overwhelmed, emotional, and I— Stop, Alara interrupted. Don't explain away something that felt real to me. I'm not trying to. I just want you to know there's no pressure, no obligation. He ran a hand through his hair, making it even messier. You've spent years having every choice taken from you. I won't be another person doing that. Alara studied his face, the careful honesty there, the genuine concern. He meant every word. Would step back if she asked, disappear from her life if she said that's what she wanted, which was exactly why she didn't want him to. What if I want the obligation? She asked. What if I'm tired of having no expectations, no connections, nothing tying me to anyone? Then we figure it out, slowly, at whatever pace feels right. He smiled. I'm not going anywhere, Alara. There's no rush. Promise? Promise. She believed him, which was remarkable considering how thoroughly her ability to trust had been destroyed. But Adrian had earned it, through action, through consistency, through showing up even when it was difficult or dangerous. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. For seeing me when no one else did. For believing me. For— Her voice caught. For making me remember that I'm worth fighting for. You were always worth fighting for. I just made sure you knew it. The sun was fully up now, light streaming through the window. A new day, bright and impossible. Alara felt the weight of everything that had happened settling over her, not crushing, but present, real. What happens now? She asked. Now you rest, then you heal. Then you decide what kind of life you want to build. Adrian stood, moving toward the door. And I'll be here, helping however I can, if you want me to be. I want you to be. His smile was genuine, warm enough to chase away some of the exhaustion. Then that's settled. Get some sleep, Alara. Tomorrow will still be there when you wake up. He left, closing the door gently behind him. Alara lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in 4 years felt something like peace. Not the absence of pain. Her shoulders still throbbed, her body still ached, and the emotional wounds would take far longer to heal than the physical ones. But the knowledge that she'd survived, that she'd fought back and won, that the future, whatever it held, belonged to her now. She fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days stretching out ahead of her like an unmarked road. Days she'd get to choose for herself. Days that were finally, completely hers. Days that were finally, completely hers. When Alara woke, it was late afternoon and someone had left food on the table beside her bed, more of Mrs. Hewitt's careful tending. The bread was still warm, which meant the old woman had been checking on her throughout the day. Alara sat up slowly, testing her shoulder. It hurt, but the pain was manageable now. Familiar. She'd lived with worse for years. She ate the bread and cheese, drank the water that had been left for her, and then stood at the window looking out at the village. Life was continuing below, merchants closing their shops, children running home for supper, normal existence carrying on like the world hadn't tilted sideways in the past 2 days. Maybe that was the point. The world kept turning whether you were drowning or finally learning to breathe. A knock at the door. Vivian entered without waiting for an answer, looking better than she had last night, but still pale, still shaken. "The trial's been scheduled," she said without preamble. 2 weeks from now. The magistrate says it's unusually fast, but the Duke pulled some strings. Of course he did. Vivian sat on the edge of the bed, twisting her hands in her lap. "I don't know if I can do it. Stand up in front of everyone and testify against her. Tell the whole county what kind of person my mother is." "You can." "How do you know?" "Because you already did the hardest part. You already chose to tell the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent." Alara joined her on the bed. "The rest is just details. Details that will destroy what's left of my reputation, make me an outcast. Maybe. Or maybe people will surprise you." Vivian laughed, but it came out broken. "People don't surprise me. They judge. They gossip. They form opinions based on whoever tells the best story. And my mother, even from a jail cell, she's probably already working on her version. She wasn't wrong. Cordelia had spent years building influence, cultivating relationships, ensuring loyalty through favors and fear. Those networks didn't just disappear because she'd been arrested. Then we tell a better story, Alara said. We show them the evidence. Let the facts speak. Facts don't matter as much as you'd think. Not when people have already decided what they want to believe. Alara wanted to argue, to insist that truth would prevail, but 4 years of being called a liar had taught her otherwise. Sometimes the truth lost. Sometimes cruelty won because it was louder, more confident, better at manipulating systems designed to protect the powerful. But not this time. This time they had witnesses, documentation, a duke willing to stake his reputation on their word. This time had to be different. We'll face it together, Alara said finally. Whatever comes, you won't be alone. Vivienne nodded, not looking entirely convinced, but at least willing to try. She left shortly after, citing exhaustion, and Alara was alone again with her thoughts. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and recovery. Adrian had hired a solicitor from the city, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Hartwell, who'd made her career prosecuting exactly the kind of white-collar crimes Cordelia had committed. The fraud case is airtight, Catherine announced during one of their meetings. Your father's original account books versus her forged versions. That alone is enough for a conviction. Add in the testimony about the abuse, the attempted murders, and we're looking at a sentence that will keep her locked away permanently. What about her connections? Alara asked. The people she's been paying off, calling in favors from? Let me worry about that. Catherine's smile was knife-sharp. I've been doing this longer than your stepmother has been manipulating people. I know how to cut through influence and get to fact. Alara wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that competence and preparation would be enough. But doubt was a hard habit to break. The trial was set to take place in the county courthouse, an imposing stone building that had stood for over a century. Alara had never been inside before, had never needed to be. Now she walked through its doors flanked by Adrian and Vivian, feeling like she was entering a different kind of battlefield. The gallery was packed. Apparently the spectacle of a duke testifying against a woman who'd attempted murder was too good to miss. Alara recognized faces from the village, from social gatherings she'd attended before Cordelia had isolated her. Some looked sympathetic, others merely curious. A few looked hostile, already convinced that Cordelia was the victim here. Cordelia herself sat at the defendant's table, looking composed and dignified despite the plain dress she'd been given in lieu of her usual finery. She'd managed to style her hair, to arrange her features into an expression of wounded innocence. Even now, even here, she was playing a role. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Cordelia smiled, small, private, full of promises that she wasn't finished yet, that even if she lost this battle, she'd find ways to wound them from behind bars. Alara forced herself to look away, to focus on Catherine, on the evidence stacked on the prosecution's table, on Adrian's steady presence beside her. The judge entered, an elderly man with a reputation for being fair but harsh. He called the court to order, and the trial began. Catherine opened with a methodical dismantling of Cordelia's carefully constructed life. She presented the account books, highlighting the discrepancies, called handwriting experts who testified that the forgeries were clear and deliberate, showed documentation of fund transfers into accounts Cordelia controlled. The defendant systematically stole from her stepdaughter while simultaneously framing that same stepdaughter for the theft, Catherine said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. This was not a crime of opportunity or desperation. This was calculated, sustained fraud designed to both enrich herself and discredit the rightful heir to the Vance estate. Cordelia's solicitor, an older man who seemed uncomfortable with his client, objected weakly. The judge overruled him. The testimony began. Mrs. Hewitt took the stand first, her weathered hands gripping the rail as she described years of watching Alara's mistreatment, the locked pantries, the inadequate food, the deliberate cruelties. "I should have spoken sooner," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "But I was afraid of losing my position, of being cast out with nowhere to go. I'm ashamed of that fear now." Other servants followed, each adding their own pieces to the mosaic of abuse. The stable boy who'd seen Alara sleeping in the kitchen, the maid who'd witnessed Cordelia striking her, the cook who'd been ordered to serve Alara only scraps and leftovers. Cordelia's solicitor tried to paint them as disgruntled employees seeking revenge, but their testimony was too consistent, too detailed, too obviously true. Then it was Vivian's turn. She walked to the stand with her head high, though Alara could see her hands shaking. She took the oath in a clear voice and sat down, finally looking at her mother. Cordelia stared back, her expression unreadable. "Miss Vance," Catherine began gently, "please describe for the court your relationship with your mother." Vivian took a breath. "I loved her. I wanted desperately for her to love me back, but her love always came with conditions. I had to be perfect, obedient, exactly what she wanted me to be. And I tried. For years, I tried. When did that change? When I realized that perfection still wasn't enough, that she'd sacrifice me as easily as she'd sacrificed Alara if it suited her purposes." Vivian's voice strengthened. "She tried to kill my stepsister twice. The second time, she would have let me die too. That's when I understood that I was never her daughter. I was a tool, a possession, something to be used." Catherine walked her through specific incidents, the beatings Vivian had witnessed, the deliberate starvation, the psychological torment. Then the cliff, both attempts, described in excruciating detail. "And after the first attempt, when the Duke intervened, what did your mother say?" "She was angry, not remorseful, not frightened, angry that she'd been caught. She immediately started planning how to discredit Alara and the Duke, how to turn the situation to her advantage." Vivian's eyes never left Cordelia's face. "She told me that Alara deserved to die, that she was weak and pathetic, and the world would be better off without her. She said it like it was a simple fact." The courtroom was silent enough to hear breathing. Cordelia's solicitor stood for cross-examination. "Miss Vance, isn't it true that you and your mother had disagreements? That perhaps your testimony is colored by a daughter's rebellion rather than objective fact?" "I'm not rebelling. I'm telling the truth. A truth that conveniently paints you as a victim alongside Miss Alara Vance, when in reality you benefited from your mother's actions for years." Vivian flinched but didn't back down. "I did benefit. I was complicit through my silence. I know that, and I'll have to live with it. But I'm not lying now. Every word I've said is true, or what you've convinced yourself is true, influenced by—" "I watched my mother try to murder someone twice," Vivian interrupted, her voice sharp. "I'm not confused about that. I'm not mistaken. It happened, and I'm done pretending it didn't." The solicitor sat down, looking defeated. Marcus testified next, describing both rescue attempts. Then Adrian took the stand, his testimony measured and precise. He detailed every conversation with Cordelia, every inconsistency he'd noticed, every red flag that had prompted his investigation. "When I saw Mrs. Vance push her stepdaughter off that cliff, it confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect," he said, "that she was a woman who would do anything, including murder, to protect the life she'd built through deception and theft." Cordelia's solicitor tried to suggest Adrian had been deceived by a pretty face, that his judgment was compromised by attraction to Alara. Adrian's response was cold and cutting. I'm a duke with significant business holdings and political responsibilities. I don't make accusations of attempted murder lightly or based on emotion. I make them based on what I witnessed with my own eyes. Finally, it was Alara's turn. She walked to the stand feeling disconnected from her body, like she was watching herself from a distance. Catherine's questions started gentle, establishing background, her relationship with her father, the early days after Cordelia's marriage, the gradual shift into abuse. Describe for the court how Mrs. Vance treated you in the years following your father's death. Alara did. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just laying out facts. The isolation, the accusations of theft, the physical abuse, the starvation. She kept her voice steady, her answers clear. But when Catherine asked about the cliff, about that moment when Cordelia's hands shoved into her back, Alara's voice finally cracked. I'd spent 4 years wishing I was dead, thinking it would be easier than surviving one more day. And then when it was actually happening, when I was falling, she stopped, composed herself. I realized I didn't want to die, that I'd never wanted to die. I just wanted the pain to stop. And who caused that pain? She did. Alara looked directly at Cordelia. Systematically, deliberately, for years. Cordelia's solicitor stood for cross-examination, but his questions were half-hearted. He tried to establish that Alara might have misinterpreted discipline for abuse, that perhaps her grief over her father had colored her perceptions. My father never struck me, Alara said flatly. He never locked me in rooms or starved me or told me I was worthless. I know the difference between grief and abuse. But you admit you were troubled after his death. I was grieving. That's not the same as unstable. And even if I had been unstable, that wouldn't justify years of systematic cruelty. She leaned forward. Nothing justifies what she did. The examination ended. Catherine called a few more witnesses, the doctor who'd treated Alara's injuries, the magistrate who'd documented the evidence. Then the prosecution rested. Cordelia's defense was thin. Her solicitor tried to paint her as a woman who'd made mistakes but meant well, who'd been trying to help an ungrateful stepdaughter who resented her presence. He called a few character witnesses, people who'd known Cordelia socially, who spoke of her charm and generosity. None of them had lived in her house. None of them had seen behind the mask. Then Cordelia took the stand. She looked small there, vulnerable in a way Alara had never seen her. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, tinged with sadness. I love Thomas Vance, she said. When he died, I tried to care for his daughter as my own. But Alara was so angry, so hurt. She blamed me for her father's death, saw me as an intruder. I tried to be patient, to give her time, but she only grew more hostile. It was a masterful performance, almost convincing if you didn't know the truth. The money that went missing from the accounts, I was trying to preserve the estate. Thomas had made some poor investments before his death, and I was attempting to shield Alara from that knowledge while I corrected the situation. When she discovered the transfers, she assumed the worst. And the cliff incident? Her solicitor prompted. Alara had been talking about suicide for weeks. I was terrified. That day, I followed her to the overlook to talk, to try to help. When she threatened to jump, I reached for her, trying to pull her back, but she jerked away and fell. Thank heaven the Duke was there to save her. The lies were smooth, practiced, delivered with perfect wounded sincerity. Catherine stood for cross-examination. Her expression was pleasant, almost friendly. Mrs. Vance, you claim you were trying to save your stepdaughter from falling. Yet 2 witnesses, both of whom have no reason to lie, testified that they saw you push her. Are they both mistaken? They misinterpreted what they saw. In the chaos of the moment, both of them, a duke and his trained assistant, both experienced men with good eyesight, both misinterpreted the same action the same way? Cordelia hesitated. It happened very quickly. Indeed. So quickly, in fact, that you had already prepared documents to have Miss Alara Vance declared mentally unfit and committed to an institution. Documents that were ready that same evening, almost as if you'd planned for this outcome. I was preparing for multiple contingencies. If Alara was truly suicidal, or if your attempt to murder her succeeded, you'd need an explanation ready. Catherine's voice was sharp now. Just as you had explanations ready for the missing money, for the abuse, for everything. You're very good at explanations, Mrs. Vance. I'm telling the truth. Let's talk about truth. You testified that you loved Thomas Vance, yet 2 days before his death, he told you he was changing his will to exclude you. How did that make you feel? Cordelia's mask slipped for just a moment. I don't recall. We have his diary, his private writings describing that exact conversation. Would you like me to read them to the court? Those are private. They're evidence, just as your forged account books are evidence, just as the testimony of a dozen witnesses is evidence, just as the bullet that grazed Miss Alara Vance during your second murder attempt is evidence. Catherine's voice rose. You can lie all you want, Mrs. Vance, but the evidence doesn't lie. The cross-examination continued for another hour, Catherine methodically dismantling every claim Cordelia made. By the end, even Cordelia's solicitor looked relieved when it was over. Closing arguments were brief. Cordelia's solicitor made a weak plea for mercy, suggesting that mistakes had been made but that imprisonment was excessive. Catherine's response was devastating. This was not a mistake. Mistakes are accidents, errors in judgment, momentary lapses. What Cordelia Vance did was calculated, sustained, and utterly without remorse. She stole from an orphaned girl. She abused her for years. She attempted murder twice when that girl threatened her control. And even now, sitting in that chair, she shows no regret, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no humanity. Catherine gestured to where Alara and Vivian sat. These young women survived despite her best efforts to destroy them. They deserve justice. They deserve to know that the legal system they're supposed to trust actually works, that it protects the vulnerable instead of the powerful. That truth matters more than influence or charm or carefully constructed lies. She turned to the jury. I'm asking you to look at the evidence, all of it, and then to do what's right, not what's easy or socially convenient or politically expedient. What's right? The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Alara spent that time in a small room with Vivian and Adrian, unable to sit still, unable to think about anything except what would happen if Cordelia somehow won. If her lies were believed, her influence prevailed, her cruelty rewarded. She won't win, Adrian said quietly. The evidence is too strong. Evidence doesn't always matter. It matters today. Trust that. When they were called back to the courtroom, Alara's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The jury filed in, their faces serious and unreadable. The foreman stood. In the matter of fraud and embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. In the matter of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. In the matter of guilty, guilty, guilty. Every charge, every count, guilty. Cordelia's face went white, then red. She started to stand, to protest, but her solicitor pulled her back down. The judge called for order as murmuring swept through the gallery. Sentencing was immediate. Mrs. Cordelia Vance, you have been found guilty of multiple serious crimes committed against those who should have been able to trust you most. The court sentences you to 25 years imprisonment with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Additionally, all assets obtained through fraudulent means are to be returned to their rightful owner, Miss Alara Vance. 25 years. Cordelia would be an old woman by the time she was released, if she survived that long. Guards approached to lead her away. Cordelia stood slowly, her composure finally cracking completely. She looked across the courtroom at Alara, and for just a moment there was nothing in her eyes but pure hatred. This isn't over, she said, her voice carrying despite the noise. You think you've won, but you'll never be free of me. Never. I'll be in your nightmares and every doubt, every fear. That's enough, the judge said sharply. The guards hauled Cordelia away, still talking, still trying to wound even in defeat. Her voice faded as she was taken from the courtroom, and then she was gone. Really, finally gone. The gallery erupted in conversation. Catherine was accepting congratulations from colleagues. The judge was calling for order. But Alara just sat there, feeling nothing and everything all at once. It was over. 4 years of abuse, 2 attempts on her life, weeks of fear and preparation and testimony, and it was over. She started crying before she realized it was happening. Big, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Vivian put an arm around her shoulders, crying too. Adrian knelt in front of them, his hands gentle on Alara's knees, just being present. You did it, he said quietly. Both of you. You stood up and told the truth, and justice actually happened. I can't believe it. It's real, Alara managed through tears. It's real. She's going to prison. You're getting your life back. All of it's real. The days after the trial passed in a strange haze. Word spread through the county fast. Everyone suddenly had opinions about Cordelia Vance and her stepdaughter. Some were sympathetic. Others, the ones who'd benefited from Cordelia's influence, were quietly hostile. Alara found she didn't care much either way. She returned to Vance Manor a week after the trial, standing in the entrance hall and feeling like a stranger in her own home. But Adrian was right. It was her home now. Legally, officially, completely hers. Time to make it feel that way. The first thing she did was unlock all the doors Cordelia had kept secured. The pantries, the storage rooms, her father's study. She threw open windows that had been shuttered for years, letting in light and air. Mrs. Hewitt cried when Alara offered her a proper position as head of household staff, with a real salary and respect instead of fear. You don't have to. I do. You stood by me when no one else would. That deserves recognition. Slowly, carefully, Alara began rebuilding. She hired a estate manager to handle the finances until she learned them herself. She brought in workers to repair damage Cordelia had let accumulate. She donated her stepmother's expensive clothes and jewelry to charity, keeping nothing that held those memories. Vivian stayed, helping where she could. They were finding their way to being sisters, real sisters, not the performance Cordelia had demanded. It was awkward sometimes, both of them carrying damage that didn't heal overnight, but they were trying. Adrian visited regularly, helping with legal matters, offering advice on estate management, slowly becoming part of the fabric of Alara's new life. The attraction between them was still there, growing steadily into something deeper. Take your time, he'd said. Figure out who you are without someone defining you. I'll still be here. 6 months after the trial, Alara stood in the manor's library, her father's favorite room, now hers. She'd spent the morning going through his papers, organizing what could be saved and discarding what couldn't. At the bottom of a drawer, she found a letter addressed to her in his handwriting. It was dated 2 days before his death. Her hands shook as she opened it. My dearest Alara, if you're reading this, then I've failed to protect you as I should have. I've realized too late that Cordelia is not who I believed her to be. I'm changing my will tomorrow to ensure she has no claim on the estate or on you. I need you to know that everything I did, marrying her, bringing her into our lives, I did because I thought it would make us happy. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. You're strong, clever, and kind. Everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. Whatever happens, whatever she does, remember that you are Thomas Vance's child. You have his stubbornness and his heart. That will carry you through anything. Be brave, my girl. Be true. And know that I loved you more than life itself. Your father Alara read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. He'd known, had tried to fix it, and Cordelia had killed him before he could, but he'd left her this, proof that she'd been loved, valued, believed in, proof that her memories of him weren't colored by grief or wishful thinking. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her pocket, close to her heart. That evening, Adrian found her in the garden. The summer air was warm, heavy with the scent of roses her father had planted years ago. She'd been working to restore the gardens to what they'd been before Cordelia let them run wild. You look like you could use company, he said. Always. She smiled. How was the meeting with the road commission? Productive. The northern route will be approved next month. He settled beside her on the bench. Which means I'll be spending more time in this area, overseeing construction, managing contracts. That's convenient, isn't it? His smile was warm. Though I'd find excuses to be here regardless. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. I found a letter from my father today, Alara said finally. Written right before he died. He knew about Cordelia, was going to protect me. I'm sorry he didn't get the chance. Me too. But at least I know now that he tried, that I wasn't wrong about him. She turned to face Adrian. For years I doubted everything. My memories, my judgment, my worth. Cordelia made me question whether my father had really loved me or if I'd just imagined it. And now? Now I know I was right. About him, about her, about all of it. She took a breath. I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not just surviving. Still learning how to trust, how to want things, how to believe I deserve good things. But I'm getting there. Adrian took her hand gently. You deserve all the good things. Every single one. I'm starting to believe that. Good. He squeezed her hand. Because I have something to ask you, and I need you to actually believe you deserve it. Alara's heart started beating faster. What is it? I know it's too soon. I know you need time to heal, to find yourself, to build your life. But I also know that I don't want to spend that time anywhere except beside you, if you'll have me. He met her eyes, not as a rescue or an obligation, as a partner, as someone who sees you, really sees you, and wants to be part of your life. Adrian, you don't have to answer now. Think about it. Take all the time you need. Just know that I mean it. Every word. Alara looked at this man who'd saved her life twice, who'd stood by her through the hardest days, who'd never once asked for anything in return. This man who'd seen her at her absolute worst and somehow still saw worth. I don't need time, she said quietly. I've spent 4 years having every choice taken from me. Now I get to choose. And I choose you. His smile was bright enough to rival the sunset. You're sure? I'm terrified. I'm damaged. I'm going to have bad days and worse nights and moments where I don't know how to be loved because I've forgotten what it feels like. She squeezed his hand back. But I'm sure. He kissed her then, gentle and careful and full of promise. When they broke apart, the sun had fully set and stars were beginning to emerge. Come on, Alara said, standing and pulling him up with her. I want to show you what I'm planning for the East Wing. I'm thinking of turning it into something useful, maybe a school for girls who need somewhere safe. A school? Or a refuge? I haven't decided yet. But something good. Something that takes all this space Cordelia filled with fear and turns it into hope instead. Adrian's expression was soft with admiration. That's perfect. They walked back to the manor together, discussing plans and possibilities. Behind them, the gardens whispered in the evening breeze. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient dance. And inside Alara, something that had been broken for 4 years finally began to heal. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But steadily, surely, like bone knitting back together. She was building a life. Her own life. By her own choices. A life that included Adrian's partnership, Vivian's tentative friendship, Mrs. Hewitt's loyal care. A life where she could be flawed and still worthy, damaged and still deserving, scarred and still beautiful. A life that was finally, completely, hers. 3 years later, Alara stood in the same garden where Adrian had asked to be part of her life, watching the sunset paint familiar colors across the sky. The manor behind her buzzed with activity, 12 girls currently in residence at the Vance Academy for Young Women, as the school had officially been named. Some had come from abusive homes. Others were orphans. A few were simply bright girls whose families couldn't afford education. All of them were learning that they had worth, value, futures that belonged to them. Alara had turned out to be a decent teacher. Not perfect. She was too blunt sometimes, too harsh when pushing them to believe in themselves. But the girls responded to her honesty, her refusal to coddle them while also refusing to break them. Adrian appeared beside her, their 2-year-old daughter balanced on his hip. Little Catherine, named for his sister, was babbling about something only she understood, her dark curls wild around her face. Mrs. Hewitt says dinner is in 10 minutes and you're not to be late because the girls worked hard on it, he said. I wouldn't dare disappoint them. Alara took Catherine from him, settling her on her own hip. The girl immediately started playing with Alara's hair, which had grown long enough to braid again. Vivian sent word, Adrian continued. She'll be arriving tomorrow with her new husband. Apparently they're very eager to meet the family. Vivian had eventually left the county, moved to the city, made a life away from Cordelia's shadow. She'd married a bookish professor who treated her kindly and never once tried to control her. They visited regularly, and each time Alara saw her stepsister, she looked more solid, more real, more herself. That's good. Catherine will be excited to have visitors. They stood together as the sun completed its descent, their daughter squirming between them. From the manor, the sound of girls laughing drifted out. Mrs. Hewitt's voice called something about setting the table properly. Normal sounds, happy sounds. Home. Do you ever think about her? Adrian asked quietly. Cordelia? Elara considered the question honestly. Sometimes. Usually when I'm dealing with the girls, seeing the damage their abusers left behind, I remember what that felt like, being broken and blamed for it. And I remember that I survived it, that survival is possible even when it doesn't feel like it. She shifted Catherine to her other hip. She tried to erase me, make me believe I was nothing, but she failed. She definitely failed. I won't lie and say I'm completely healed. I still have nightmares. I still flinch at loud noises. I still have moments where I doubt everything. Elara looked at Adrian. But I'm here. I'm building something good. I'm raising a daughter who will never question whether she deserves to exist. You're doing more than that. You're changing lives. We're changing lives. This isn't just me. Adrian smiled and kissed her forehead. Fair enough. Come on, let's get inside before Mrs. Hewitt sends a search party. They walked back together, Catherine chattering between them, the warm light from the manor's windows spilling out to greet them. Elara paused at the threshold, looking back one last time at the garden, the cliff path just visible in the distance where moonlight caught the ocean. That cliff had almost been the end of her story. Instead, it had been the beginning of everything after. She'd fallen, and someone had caught her. She'd been broken, and she'd learned to heal. She'd been told she was worthless, and she'd proven them spectacularly wrong. Not perfectly, not without scars, not without cost. But she'd survived. And more than that, she'd learned to live. Elara stepped through the door into the noise and warmth and chaos of home, leaving the darkness behind her where it belonged. In the past, in the place where Cordelia Vance's influence ended and Elara's real life began.